Google just released Gemini 3.1 Pro yesterday, and they're claiming it's able to beat Claude on the majority of benchmark tests, and it costs half the price. But benchmarks and real results are two very different things, so I put them head to head to really understand which model is better and the outputs you should actually expect. We're going to run through an SVG infographic, a toggle switch that we can turn on and off, and a website that is quickly pulled together by all of the models. By the end of the video, you know exactly what's new with Gemini 3.1 Pro and how it's performing in real-world tests. So firstly, what's new with Gemini 3.1 Pro? We're going to speed through some of these updates just to cover the most important ones. I think the key thing to note for this is that when we're testing the model, I've actually found that it's more to do, as you can see there, about the deep reasoning and problem solving over anything else. They've made a step forward in the actual core reasoning that sits behind it, for that smart, more capable baseline decision making, especially for complex problem solving. And if we come across to the latest testing results, we'll see that we've got Gemini 3.1 Pro here with the dark blue, we've got Gemini 3 Pro with the light, and then we've got Opus 4.6 at the end here. One thing to note straight away is, of course, that advanced reasoning is really showing up in the results. For example, when we're doing the advanced reasoning, as we can see here, we can see that Gemini 3 Pro is now up to 77% versus Opus is back down at 68%. If we come down again to the scientific knowledge, we've got a slight increase by 3% from 91 with Opus 4.6 up to 94 with Gemini 3.1 Pro. And when we come down, of course, to the agentic coding terminal, we'll see here that we've got 68% instead of 65% with Opus 4.6. And what this essentially means is it's just better at solving those complex problems, thinking it through, trying to come up with that end result. But I have noticed whilst testing it out, and maybe just because it's brand new, it does come at a significant time cost to get the output. If we come further down, we'll also see that it's made that step improvement for using the MCP, but also really interesting, the agentic search as well. As we can see here, we're now up to 85% versus what was 59.2% with Gemini 3 Pro. So we're now more or less on par with the Opus 4.6. And if we come down to the last section here, what we'll be able to see is how good it is at recalling information, whether that be in a long context window or questioning back and forth within multi-language. And when we come down to the long context reasoning, what we'll see here is that it matches the models like Opus 4.6 when we've got the average token amount that people are putting through. But of course, because we've now got a 1 million token window, which the other models don't have, i.e. how much text and words we can put through, we still have that 26.3% success rate for pulling out key pieces of information buried in the long context. Something I did notice right down the bottom of the press release is they did mention that, of course, it's now available for Notebook LM. I can imagine this will actually be a great use case for the new Gemini 3.1 Pro model because of that advanced complex problem solving and that huge context window of 1 million tokens really suits it to those sort of tasks, to be researching and analyzing, pulling out of insights, of course, all of these different parts that Notebook LM is fantastic on. If you don't know what Notebook LM is, I've got a video link down below, make sure to check it out. But one of the really big updates is pricing. What we'll be able to see here is that Gemini 3.1 Pro is currently almost 2.5 times cheaper than if we were to come up to Opus, as we can see here. So that could be a significant cost saving for many organizations. So how do we actually access Gemini 3.1 Pro? Well, they're slowly rolling it out across the world for all of their users, starting on the Ultra and then Pro plans as well, and of course free over a longer period of time. When you come across to AI Studio, what you'll be able to see is when you come to the playground section, on the right hand side here, you'll see Gemini 3.1 Pro. If you don't, just click whatever model you can see here, and then we can see all of the different ones available. Just type 3.1 and you'll be able to select it and get up and running. One thing that was really interesting to see as well is the thinking level that you can activate now has low, medium, and high, so that we can get the more in-depth reasoning, versus if we just come back to Gemini 3, we've only got low or high. So it's really interesting to see that they're now advancing that element, of course, around the thinking level to get the outputs to. So which model's best? Well, I put Gemini 3 versus 3.1 Pro versus Opus 4.6 head-to-head across 3 tests. The first test was to generate an animated SVG. We wanted a lone figure that was going to be walking across a windswept moor at dusk, and it was going to be foggy. Rolling hills forward in the distance, foreboding manor house on the horizon, including subtle wind effects, flickering lantern light on the figure, and gentle cloud movement. Make it loop smoothly, crisp at any scale, dark atmosphere color palette, and of course we wanted it in that SVG style. This was the output from Gemini 3. I think what we can see straight away is it's very basic. It does incorporate the majority of information that we gave it. It doesn't have that figure in here, which is worth noting. The house is also weirdly floating, and I think that quality is probably a 5 out of 10. Now, this is Gemini 3.1 Pro. I'd say it's more or less the same quality for the outputs. I don't think that's very good. We've got the lantern that seems to be flickering in the background there. Again, not the highest quality that I'd expect based on some of the demos that they were showcasing on their website. But now, if we come across to Claude Opus 4.6, I think the quality here is noticeably better. We've got the moon in the background, the stars that sit around. I think they've got the character or lonely figure up the top here. So again, it's not formatted that correctly, but it does have the glass that's moving. It's got that more noticeable fog across the entire image. The manor house looks much more like a manor house than any of the ones before, and it actually looks like it's on a hill. I like the way that, yes, the grass is moving, maybe a little bit too exaggerated, but it's much better than what we were getting from Gemini. And the key part for testing with this is we gave it so much information that it needed to really break down, understand what each part meant, how to put it all together, and it's really noticeable how much better Opus 4.6 was at completing this. Next, I wanted to replicate one of the demos they had on their website, which was having a switch that turned on and off. Exactly the same as what they were saying on their website. We wanted it to create a standalone animated SVG that was able to go through in a minimalist UI style, and this was the output from Gemini 3. When we come across, we can see that it does turn on and off, and I do like the way the light mode is positioned for when it's turned on, but I think it did start to struggle with that night mode. I liked that we had all of the coding elements coming through. There was something specific I wanted to be able to test with this. It doesn't seem to have put the actual toggle in the right space. We'd want to make sure that, of course, it's left and then right for either on or off. We could also probably further improve the prompting to get that glowing blue light at the back there, maybe to be a moon or slightly to the right, but for a one prompt approach is not bad. Now, when we come across to Gemini 3.1 Pro, something really interesting happened. Maybe it's because how many people are trying to test it out at the moment, but this actually tried to run for 30 minutes and didn't even give me a preview in the end. So what I ended up having to do was copy all of this code, come across to Code Pen just so that we could test it out. Now we'll be able to see we've got the light mode on, and then we've got the night mode turned on. I definitely think that this was much better for that toggle on and off. It stayed within the boundaries that we expect it to. The coding elements in the background still seem a little bit weird, but again, we can massively improve that as we go through. The moon isn't centralized in the middle, so there's definitely the opportunity to enhance it in the future. And then last but not least, we've got Opus 4.6. So if we toggle on and off, it's really interesting to see almost that worst daytime, I think, out of the 3. We can't see the sun until it turns itself off. So again, we would definitely want to improve the structure of that to make sure that we can see the sun from the first part. It also doesn't change the background, whereas the other 2 did. So we want to make sure that, of course, when we were going through and changing the prompt or adding multiple ones in, because again, this was the same prompt across the 3, we would have it so that it generates the better outputs. I do prefer the little starry elements it's got on the toggle switch for the nighttime mode, and some of the elements that come up for the coding side that I think is probably a little bit worse than what we had for Gemini 3, but still better than that Gemini 3.1 Pro. Next, I wanted to test out the website capabilities. So first up, we've got Gemini 3. As we can see here, this is one prompt that was asking to go through, have a career highlights website for an individual that's maybe an F1 driver. I think it's good overall. What we would expect from a platform like Gemini 3 has been incredibly good so far. So let's check out how it compares to the newer version. So now we're on the Gemini 3.1 Pro version, and overall, I think they look pretty similar. If we come down here again, they've got some similar points that they're mentioning. They've got similar images, loads of different points. I wouldn't notice any major difference between the 2. And then last but not least, we've got Opus 4.6. And actually, I think this may be the best out of the three. When we come down here, we can see it's got that image it pulled in from Pexels to be able to have it in the background. It's got that glow over the text. I like the way that it's got the premium structure. So we scroll down, it's got a bit more relevant context and information. It's got that background that you can see here as we just scroll down for that car in the background. Strategy, technology, it's got some different hover over elements. So actually, I would say that this is probably the best one out of the three for web UI design. And then lastly, I wanted to go through and test out the complex reasoning skills. So we've got Gemini 3 versus 3.1 Pro versus Opus 4.6. What we wanted it to do is go through and analyze a 3x3 grid using letters R for red, B for blue, and G for green, Y for yellow, and then empty being black. The goal was to infer the hidden transformation rules from the demonstrated input-output pairs, explain the reasoning step by step, and then apply the rule to produce your own correct outputs. So as we can see here, we gave it a few examples, and then we came down the bottom here and we gave it this one. Now, when we come down to the bottom, we'll see that Gemini 3 got it wrong. This is not the output that we were expecting. But if we come across to Gemini 3.1 Pro and come down the bottom here, we'll be able to see that it did get the correct output. So that's where the leap forward came through from that advanced reasoning element is definitely noticeable for 3 versus 3.1 Pro. And then last but not least, if we come across to Opus 4.6, it was also able to solve the puzzle. So that means that Gemini 3.1 Pro and Opus 4.6 definitely have that more enhanced capability for advanced reasoning, solving complex problems to get the outputs. So what do I think? Well, I think Gemini 3.1 Pro is definitely a step forwards. I think it's probably on par or slightly worse than Opus 4.6. I personally will definitely be sticking with Opus 4.6 for a lot of the workflows that I've already got running. And of course, Claude Code, I won't be switching that across to Gemini anytime soon, but I think it'll be really interesting to see that Opus 5 versus maybe that Gemini 4 or that Gemini 3.5 when they probably make that next step forwards to see them head to head and how they get the outputs. Or the other angle may be, now it's got that advanced reasoning and the coding is quite high quality. Maybe it's something that I'll use for that much cheaper model to run in the background and then save Opus 4.6 for those more complex tasks. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. We've got lots of other content around AI and automation. Make sure to come across to the community if you want to learn more about AI and automation, and stay tuned for the next video and have a great day.